Hey guys, it's Nqaba here, and welcome back to another weekly upload. So this week, I'm going to be sharing a message. And yeah, before we get on with anything, don't forget guys to like, share, and subscribe, and to also check out the other videos that we have if you haven't already. So yeah, now that we've got that aside, let's just get into the message that we have this week. So this week, or this message, is kind of a tricky one, especially in the time that we're in right now, because there's just a lot of injustice that's going on, whether it be racism, gender-based violence, or even xenophobia and other forms of marginalization, and I could go on and on and on. And a question that I had, because I had a conversation with my sister around these things, and the question that we were kind of wrestling with or struggling to kind of answer or find an answer on was, where is God in all of these injustices, and what does this justice look like? What does God's justice look like? Because the Bible says that revenge is not for our taking, but it's for the Lord's. So now that we can't take our own revenge, or we can't take the law or justice into our own hands, what does God's justice look like? So because I couldn't find that answer in conversation, I decided, the best place or the best thing to do is rather just pray and read the Bible, and just kind of wait for God to speak. So this is kind of the answer that I received, or the revelation that I received from digging into this question and just pressing in. So the first question that I asked is, what is God's position? Or God, what is your position in all of this? So in a world of hate and of abuse and of violence and marginalization, where are you, God? And it took me back so the answer to this question took me back to one of the podcasts that Pastor Pilani posted and released last week during the time of renewal. And basically he was tackling the analogy or the situation where when we go through life's issues and problems and situations, where is God? Because we often feel like God is far away, or we feel in a place where he's not with us, in the troubles, or it's very hard to see him. So I'm just going to paraphrase what he said. So he said basically that when faced with life's problems, we often ask God, where are you? And we often feel like he's far away and nowhere to be found. But in actual fact, God isn't far away from the problem, but he's actually in the middle of the problem. It's just that we need to rise up to a higher dimension to find him and to see him. And the thing is that his answer matches up with the story of the disciples nearly drowning at sea on two separate occasions. And we find these stories in John chapter 6, verse 16 to 21, and Luke 8, verse 22 to 25. And I'm just going to narrate the stories. You guys can go back and read them later. So in the first story in John chapter 6, so what happened is that Jesus went up to the mountain to pray. And the disciples waited for him, and they ended up sailing into the middle of the lake because they waited for him for too long. So then a storm came about, and the thing is that Jesus was watching the storm develop from the mountaintop. And now the disciples are wrestling with the storm that they're in. So Jesus comes down from the mountain, and instead of him just stopping at the shore, he actually walks out into the storm to meet the disciples. And it wasn't enough that Jesus went out there and stood there, met them, but he called Peter out. So Peter stepped out of the boat to walk towards Christ, to walk on water, So Peter rose to a higher dimension and basically did the impossible. He defied the laws of physics. And so now in the second story also, this time they're in the middle of the storm and Jesus is in the boat, but Jesus is sleeping. And now while they're wrestling with the storm and they're feeling like their lives are gonna end there and there, they wake Jesus up, and Jesus is kind of in this like cool mood, and he's like, bruh, why are you guys waking me up? Like, why are you scared that you're gonna die? Like, it's not my time to die, so definitely you guys are not also gonna die. So that's the first part of what I kind of realized, is that Christ, or God, when we're in the storms and the troubles of life, we are within, like, as people would say, the pits. Jesus is not standing at like on the outside of the pits or at the top and kind of shouting to us to like climb out, but God is within the pits with us. Was with us like in the valley, and we just need to rise up to a higher dimension to meet him. So as I go on kind of wrestling with this question of God's position, what is God's position? The revelation of position is determined by principle. So in order for you to figure out someone's position on a topic or an issue, you find out what the person's principles are, because it's your principles that inform your position. So one of God's greatest and most important commandments or principles is his love. And he says that continually through the Bible. So I wanted to share with you guys the golden principles of love. Alright, so what are these golden principles of love? So these principles are founded on scriptures on love, basically. So the first one that we're going to get is from Mark chapter 12, verse 29 to 30. And it basically goes along the lines of love your neighbor as yourself. There's no other commandment that is greater than these. And in the Amplified version, it says, you shall unselfishly love your neighbor as yourself. And I think it's kind of pretty self-explanatory, And the thing is that when it points out neighbor, God doesn't add, a deeper description. He just says your neighbor. So your neighbor is literally anyone and everyone. So the next principle is, it goes on to further say, don't only love your neighbor, but also love your enemies. And this is in Matthew chapter 5, verse 43 to 48. And it basically states that the law states that you should love your neighbor and hate your enemies. And as soon as Christ finishes that statement, he goes on to say that you should actually love your enemies and pray for those that persecute you. And the thing is that it's very hard to pray for someone that you hate or someone that you don't love. Because at some point, if you're truly praying in the Spirit, that hate is going to end up dissipating, or you're going to end up loving the person, because the Spirit of God is going to conquer you in prayer. And the thing is that hate and God can't dwell in the same place. It's like water and oil. So by doing this, you'll be acting as a true child of God. And the thing is that as we go on to the verses and read further on, you can see that it basically states that you can hate all you want and wish the worst over someone. But at the end of the day, God even says that his sunlight will shine on both good and evil, and that he sends rain to the just and the unjust alike. So you can hate all you want or choose not to love, but that's not going to make a difference, So you might as well love and live a life of love as God has called us to. So the next principle is don't pretend. Your love mustn't be superficial, but that it must be something that comes from deep within. And we find this in Romans 12, verse 9 to 11. So it says, don't pretend to love others, really love them. Hate is wrong, and hold tightly to what is good. Love each other with genuine affection, and take delight in honoring each other. So basically says, in black and white, don't pretend to love them, really love them. And hate is wrong. And in the Amplified, it goes on to say that hate what is evil, detest all ungodliness, do not tolerate wickedness, So the love that we need to have is a love that comes from deep within. It's a love that should come from the heart, And it's Christ that can change our hearts and that can truly show us how to love, because he is our true model and example of love. So the next principle is love covers a multitude of sins, which we find in 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 8. So it says here, most important of all, continue to show deep love for each other, for love covers a multitude of sins. So in the Amplified it says, love covers a multitude of sins. It overlooks unkindness and unselfishly seeks the best for others. So what is the best for others? Is it condemnation or is it conviction? And before we even answer that question, we need to look to ourselves, because what about ourselves? Because Jesus covered our multitude of sins and showed us that love can actually do it. So why can't we, through our love, cover the multitude of sins? And the last principle is that we mustn't forget love. And this comes from 2 John chapter 1 verse 5. There's only one chapter in 2 John, and it basically says that I'm writing to you to remind you, dear friends, that we should love one another. This is not a new commandment, but one we have had from the beginning. Love means doing what God has commanded us, and He has commanded us to love one another, just as we heard from the beginning. And the second one, or the second piece of scripture, comes from John chapter 13, verse 34 to 35. And it's basically the Last Supper, or the ending parts of the Last Supper. Judas has hit a swerve and, left. And basically Jesus says, or Jesus reminds us or renews His commandment. So He says that, so now I'm giving you guys a new commandment. Love each other just as I have loved you. You should love one another. So basically Christ is saying that the true model of love is Himself. Christ is the example of love that we should follow, And He goes on to say that your love for one another will prove to the world that you are my disciples. So Jesus is basically saying to us that, His love is the model that we should follow, Just as we have been loved by Him, we should love others. What does God's justice look like? So God's justice is actually setting the perpetrated, or the perpetrated. God's justice is setting the perpetrated free and giving them healing so that they can live life freely. So in John 10:10, it talks about how the thief's purpose is to steal, kill, and destroy, and that Christ came that we may live life and live it to the fullest. In the NLT, it says that my purpose is to give them a rich and satisfying life. So it isn't in God's purpose to take and to destroy the perpetrator's life, or to destroy lives just in general, as we would want to see, because our justice is, seeing someone experience the same pain or the same hurt that we did, or that they brought upon us. But that's not how God operates. God came that, He may give us life. And the thing is that God's justice isn't destroying someone else's life. That's the thief's purpose. God's purpose is to restore life, is to give life, and to give it in its richest and most satisfying form. And I think God's justice is restoring rather than taking away and destroying. And we can't expect God to operate outside of his purpose or outside of His personality. If God was to destroy and to take away, can you really call it God's justice? Can you really trust Him after doing that? No. Because that's going against His word. And the thing is that God sticks to His word because His word is truth. And it's His word that we hold on to. And just as God acts from a place of love and truth, that means that we should also act from a place of love and truth. Because we were created in His image. We were created in His likeness. And love cannot move without truth. And vice versa, truth cannot move without love. So let's love and share the truth. And I think that's what God's justice looks like. But as much as we share love and truth, let's also be wise in how we share it. So I basically scoured the Proverbs for basically wise sayings, and I'm just going to give you guys a few scriptures on wisdom. So the first one comes from Proverbs 15 verse 1, which is, a gentle answer deflects anger, but harsh words makes tempers flare, and the tongue of the wise makes knowledge appealing. And the next one is in Proverbs 10 verse 10 to 13. People wink at wrong cause or wrong troubles, but a bold reproof promotes peace. The words of the godly are a life-giving fountain. The words of the wicked conceal violent intentions. Hatred stirs up quarrels, but love makes up for all offenses. Wise words come from the lips of people with understanding, but those lacking sense will be beaten with a rod. And the next one is from Proverbs 14 verse 33. Wisdom is enshrined in an understanding heart. Wisdom is not found among fools. And the next one is Proverbs 19 verse 2. Proverbs 19 verse 2. And it says that enthusiasm without knowledge is no good. Haste makes mistakes. And let's not also forget Proverbs 18 verse 21, which says that the tongue can bring life or death. The tongue is a very powerful muscle that if we don't control it, can bring about a lot of destruction. And wisdom, what I also found in the Proverbs is that wisdom isn't only speaking. Being wise isn't only speaking or speaking wise words, but wisdom is also listening and learning and accepting correction and discipline. And we find these in Proverbs chapter 12 verse 1. To learn you must love discipline. It is stupid to hate correction. The next one, Proverbs 12:15. Fools think their own way is right, but the wise listen to others. Next one in Proverbs 12:23. The wise don't make a show of their knowledge, but fools broadcast their foolishness. And then the last one in Proverbs 10:17, to wrap it all up, is people who accept discipline and correction are on the pathway to life, but those who ignore correction will go astray. So in this time, personally, I think that you must have love. But love doesn't go without truth. So as much as we love one another, we also need to speak the truth. You know, Jesus's ministry was based on telling people the truth and changing people's lives from speaking the truth. But in also speaking the truth, let us also be wise. And not just wise to speak, but wise to listen. You know. So yeah, guys, love matters, truth matters, and also wisdom matters. So yeah, guys, that's my message for this week. So don't forget, guys, to like and to share the video with others. If you feel like this is a message that people should hear, then please share it with everyone, your friends, your family, your dogs and your cats. And yeah, guys, comment, guys. We'd like to hear your perspective and how you feel. And yeah, guys, don't forget to subscribe and to click on the bell icon to know when we're uploading the next video. Anyway, guys, see you guys next week. Cheers.